Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. My name is Beth Monholland, and I am honored to serve as your worship associate today and to welcome you fully into this space. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies here. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit here. We welcome all that you bring with you today and all that your heart longs to set down. We welcome all of you. We extend a special welcome to each guest among us this morning. Guests are invited to come early on another Sunday and drop in the Inquirer session at 10:10 in the parlor, where you can learn more about Unitarian Universalism and our church in a smaller, more casual gathering. We invite guests to fill out a welcome card located in the pew rack in front of you and to drop it in the offering plate later in the service. Guests can also pick up welcome packets at the rear of the sanctuary, where folks will also find hearing assist devices and Braille hymnals. A fragrance-free area is located on the front right side of the sanctuary in the first few pews. If you are a visiting family, including children or youth, after the time for all ages, which is noted in your order of service, please join the children's recessional across the hall in the common room. There, you will be greeted by someone who will orient you to religious education. Immediately following the service, everyone is invited for coffee and conversation in the common room. My name again is Beth, and I'd be delighted if you would talk to me at the guest table there. As a way to engage at First Church, I invite everyone to explore the announcements insert for the numerous opportunities available here. This morning, let me draw your attention to just a few. First Church will be providing an Easter weekend meal for the Guest House Shelter for Men this Saturday, April 20th. Please stop by the social justice table in the common room after service to sign up. Celebrate National Poetry Month at First Church today with poetry reading and open mic against hunger from 1:30 to 3 in Max Otto Hall. We will feature poets from the Bards Against Hunger book, proceeds of which will go to the Interchange Food Pantry. Reverend Jennifer is co-leading a Maundy Thursday foot washing service with Underwood Memorial Church and Zao MKE this Thursday at 6:30 p.m. at Underwood Baptist Church in Wauwatosa. If you are looking for an additional Holy Week service, see First Church's Facebook page for more details. And there are a few emails and Facebook scams moving through the church world. Please know that neither Reverend Dina nor Reverend Jennifer will ever email you asking you for money, gift cards, or your bank information. If you get such an email, delete it, and if you have any doubt, just contact the church. Please find information about these and more events in the announcements insert. Finally, so that we may all stay fully present with each other this morning, please be sure you silence any electronic devices for the remainder of the service. Once again, I welcome you to First Church and invite you to join me in the unison reading of our mission, printed in your order of service. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. It's now my pleasure to welcome Yet McDaniel and her grandma, Erica Gottschalk, to light our chalice this morning.
The trees outside are slow growing in the closing cold. Buds lurk beneath the surface of limbs stretching towards the warming sun. Each arborist knows the cold holds many secrets, dormant, living beneath the snow that are fetched again when the sun beckons. Just as the river still runs beneath the layer of ice, the tree breathes beneath the bark. And now, in this interstitial season of wakefulness and sleep, stuttered shaking off of dormancy, may love and sun beckon us forth too, to breathe again, stretch, integrate the knowledge of the long, slow months, the pains and the losses, the griefs and the hurts, but also the growing knowing of self, of love, of the whole, and of our own growing wholeness. Matches are hard. Will you please rise in body or spirit and join us in our opening hymn, number 1007.
Good morning. I'm Deb Solis, and today's Time for All Ages story is a Cherokee tale by storyteller Gail Ross, retold by Olive Hacknett Shaughnessy. This is what the elders told me when I was a child. In the beginning, everything was water. There was nothing but a great ocean. And then water beetle dove to the bottom of the sea and brought up a handful of mud, which grew to become this land. Buzzard came down from the world above and flew across the world. Making wind with his wings, he dried the earth, carving the valleys and shaping the mountains. Grandmother Sun began following the path through the heavens that she follows to this day, and Uncle Moon smiled at night. And all the creatures came down from the world above to make a home of this middle world. At that time, Creator spoke to all his children, plants and animals alike. It is my wish that you all fast and pray for wisdom and strength. Keep watch and stay awake. This you must do for 7 days and 7 nights. His children promised to follow his instructions. Throughout the first night, almost all of Creator's children remained true to their promise. When the sun rose, only the littlest people, the insects, had fallen asleep. But as day followed night, and night followed day, more and more creatures succumbed to their weariness and drifted into dreams. When the 7th night came to an end, of the animal people, Only the panther and the owl remained awake. Along with the wisdom and strength they had gained from their vigil, they were given the power to see in the dark and to prey on those who must sleep at night. Among the standing people, the trees, only the cedar, the pine, the spruce, the laurel, and the holly had remained true to Creator's instructions. To these, Creator gave the gift of remaining evergreen, while their brothers and sisters shed their leaves in the fall and stood bare during the cold months of winter. It was given to them also to be the providers of strong medicines. They were given the most sacred of all powers, the power to heal. We invite children and teachers to join in singing verse 1 of hymn number 1031, and then proceed to their classes as the congregation continues to sing you on your way. And as we sing verse 2, may you be filled with loving kindness.
I am delighted to share with you the news of 2 births in our congregation. Evelyn DeBoer was born to parents Amanda DeBoer and Andrew Bodispargo this past Thursday, April 11th at 7:18 a.m. Evelyn is Amanda and Andrew's first child, and she arrived in this world weighing 6 pounds, 15 ounces. Evelyn and her parents are happy, healthy, and surrounded by family. Krista Jarzinski and Ted Noel recently welcomed their first child into the world as well. Marta Kathleen Jarzinski Monicelli was born on March 26th, 2019 at 5:26 p.m., weighing 7 pounds and 13 ounces. Marta and her parents are all doing well, and they might be here today. They may also be dealing with an infant. Thus, as is our custom in this congregation, whenever we have a birth, an adoption, or a death among our members, we light our candle of life. Today, in honor of Evelyn DeBoer and Marta Kathleen Jarzinski Monicelli. I'd like to invite you now to just settle in for a time of contemplation, which will be followed by silence, followed by the seated singing of Spirit of Life. So feel your body. Notice your sit bones pressing into the seat beneath you, your feet on the floor grounding you. And the tip top of your head connecting you to all that is. And feel your breath moving in and out. Let it bring you into being right here, right now. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. Ground us on this chilly morning in our memory of all that is whole. The wholeness of the four seasons, the wholeness of each transition, the wholeness of our complicated lives of joy and sorrow. May we each remember the singing that comes in the spring and also honor the hurt places of the winter. May we know that each season takes its place in a whole life, and each life flows into the whole world. May we learn to be with all the seasons, all the lives and moments, growing. May it be so.
In early 2016, I started having panic attacks again for the first time in about 16 years. I was terrified, ashamed, and determined to deal with it on my own, which for me meant telling myself my life was good and I had no right to feel that way, and so I should go about my days as usual, smiling and working, and then collapsing when I got home, or more often than not, dissolving into tears alone in my car. After months of increased anxiety, thoughts of self-harm became a near daily pressure, and I longed to go to sleep and never wake up. But I kept ignoring the emotional turmoil until my body was done with my denial, and I got very sick at the end of 2016, and it was the impetus I needed to go back to therapy. The therapist I began working with is an expert in trauma-informed care, and from that perspective, she helped me to see that the roots of my anxiety and fear stemmed from a specific adolescent trauma I survived, and that to get healthy, I needed to deal with it. But I didn't want to, because I thought I had dealt with that trauma, that I should be done with it, that a 30-year-old wound should not have such power over me, and I saw my anxiety and panic attacks as proof that I was broken and unlovable. And in a circular kind of logic, since I did not want to be broken and unlovable, I decided I should just push it all away to prove that I was fine, which is, of course, what I had been doing. I had been committing and overcommitting, doing and overdoing as a way of earning love, as a way of cutting myself in pieces to try to be whole. But I slowly began to trust my therapist's words that my life is not an either-or. It is not that I am fully fixed or I am fully broken. It is a both-and. I am hurt and I am healing. And for an hour a week in her office, and for an hour each week in these pews with this community, I could believe that. But it was in a story, a work of fiction, that I found the words I needed to believe in healing outside of these walls, and to stop the madness of tearing myself apart. I was reading a historical romance mystery novel, like you do. It's centered around a judicial reformer in mid-19th century Bristol, England. He had been severely abused as a child, and he used that experience to work for justice as an adult. And while he was very successful, he also suffered from what we would call post-traumatic stress response. He had trouble forming relationships and trusting people. He suffered from night terrors. He startled easily and needed to be in control of his environment to feel safe. Over the course of the story, he meets a woman, was partly a romance, but he cautions her against forming an attachment with him. It worked out badly for other people in the past, he tells her, because they were always trying to fix him. Fix you, she asks. Why would anyone try to fix you? You're not broken. I've seen broken. Broken is when we can't keep going after bad things happen, but you kept going. You didn't break. She accepted him as he was. She didn't see him as a broken, unlovable thing, and he accepted himself, post-traumatic stress and all, as someone worthy of love. And I saw that those in my life who knew all the parts of me loved me unconditionally. And those words on that page, "You're not broken," invited me to see myself with a new lens. Not broken, just scarred. And from that moment, I began to realize that my anxiety was only partly from the original wound. The anxiety was also from years of denying the scars that that wound left, from thinking that healing was a task to check off my to-do list, and then magically the past would disappear. I began to accept that healing happens over and over, as frustrating as that can be, and that it starts with accepting all of me, with accepting that the past happened, but knowing that it didn't break me. And outside of my therapist's office, and outside of the love that I feel when I'm in these pews, if I have trouble remembering that, I close my eyes and I can see those words on that page. You're not broken. You're not broken.
In her book, The Deepest Well, Healing the Long-Term Effects of Childhood Adversity, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris tells the story of Gabriel Crom, the executive director of the Mind-Body Awareness Project, an organization which does mindfulness work with children in juvenile hall. Gabriel Crom grew up in an upper-middle-class family in St. Louis, and he went away to college at Yale to study neurobiology. While he was there, he grew more and more disconnected from the program and from himself, and he devolved into deep anger. He dropped out of school and started hanging out with a crowd of people that were involved in drugs and violence. And one night, the leader of the group took Gabriel out into the city, gave him a hit of LSD, and tried to convince him to kill someone. This person put a knife in Gabriel's hand, pointed him towards the intended victim, and shoved this angry young man in a very suggestible state of mind forward. Right outside of this church, right here on Ogden, there's a tree that stands with a knot in its bark, tight and high, just above the top of my arm. Tight knots are the most common type of knot in a tree. They're bulges in the tree's trunk, a hard curling in of wood that ends up being tougher than the rest of the tree. This type of knot is caused by the tree trunk growing up and growing around lower branches. When a branch is living and still embedded in the tree with the trunk growing around it, it creates a tight knot, firmly attached to the tree and integrated into its structure. Eventually, as the tree grows, lower branches drop off, and with time, the tree's trunk wood grows up over the knot, encasing it in bark. These kinds of knots exist because a tree has lived long enough to grow up and over its lower branches. Human lives all have losses caused by growth and the passage of time. At the most basic, unavoidable level, if we have the privilege of surviving, we grow up and older. None of us gets to stay a 5-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 30-year-old, a 60-year-old. Each new season of life includes the loss of the last one. I have my own fluttering, nostalgic loss for my childhood, for the mustard yellow cupboards and the crepe-painted wallpaper of morning Cheerio cereal before school. But this body will never be 5 again, except in my mind's dreams. There's loss in that. A tender little grief remembering running through the grass of my parents' backyard, chasing butterflies on a sunny summer day. Philosopher and theologian Alfred North Whitehead says that this is the loss embedded at the core of life's ticking clock. Even in the best case scenario, living, time steals our past. Many parents share the bittersweet grief that accompanies baby's first step, first day of school, first track meet, first date, first solo travel away from home. Each new first contains new accomplishment and joy at baby's growth, and it also means the loss of the period before and the sure, inevitable knowledge that baby is growing up. The trunk of the larger life grows up and over those lower branches, leaving tight knots firmly embedded in their place. The second kind of tree knot is called a loose knot. This happens when a branch is injured or dies while it's still attached to the tree. A loose knot contains visible cracks, and it's surrounded by scar tissue. The wood at the center of the knot is loose, it's decaying or even dead. The center can fall out, leaving an empty hole. And then the trunk of a tree eventually toughens and the bark grows up and surrounds the hole, making it a knot hole. I had a teacher once who hated it when people who would talk about returning to wholeness or becoming whole again. He was one of those lucky people who had an epic love story of finding the love of his life across time and space, of knowing her soul the moment he met her. They spent nearly a decade together in a happy marriage. And then one afternoon, he got the call that ripped his heart out. She had been killed in a car accident. Years later, after doing a lot of healing work, he had become comfortable with the idea that he would never be whole again. A part of him was irrevocably lost, a loose knot with the center torn out. He didn't think his life was irrevocable. He was living and healing and working and serving the whole of all being. He just didn't think his life was whole without his wife, and he preferred to frame his life as living well with a piece of it missing. Folks who work with wood find loose knots harder to work with than tight knots. And some woodworkers worry that loose knots and knot holes weaken the wood they're working with. But in the right hands, these loose knots and knot holes become stunning pieces of art with natural curves that make the wood its unique shape. As Beth noted from that historical romance mystery novel, didn't even know those things could go together. Thank you, Beth. Loose knots are beautiful aspects of wood's natural shape. The injuries and losses that cause them are just as much a part of the tree as growing branches. The woman who loved that judicial reformer said, "Why would anyone need to fix you? You are not broken. You kept going after bad things happened, and you did not break." If you are a person working with a loose knot, you need the love of a woodworker who understands the beauty of the loose knot, who says, this place in the wood tells the story of the tree's life. This is where the injury happened, that the tree survived. The third kind of tree knot is called a black knot, and it's caused by a fungal infection in the wood called black knot disease. Unlike the other two kinds of knots that show up in a tree trunk, these black knots show up on a tree's extremities first, on twigs and small branches. But if the infection isn't treated, it can spread to the main branches and even to the trunk, and eventually spread to the trees around it. Early treatment of black knot disease can save the tree and reduce the spread of the disease to surrounding trees. In human beings, this makes me think of the particular kind of pain and loss that accompanies trauma and toxic stress. Untreated toxic stress and unattended trauma wreaks havoc on the mind and on the body, and it can spread to nearby bodies. In her book, The Deepest Well, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris writes about her process tracking the effects of toxic stress and adverse childhood experiences in the Bayview, Hunters Point neighborhood of San Francisco. Dr. Burke observes that children with 4 or more adverse childhood experiences, 4 or more traumatic experiences, were 32 times as likely to have learning and behavioral problems. According to her medical research, the underlying problem was chronic dysregulation of the stress response system, which inhibited the prefrontal cortex, overstimulated the amygdala, and short-circuited the stress thermostat. Stress hormones are produced by adverse experiences. They're produced by trauma, and they cause responses in the brain, in the hormone system, in the immune system, and even epigenetically. Dr. Harris told the story of one of her patients, Charlene, who was suffering from postpartum depression, and Dr. Burke suspected also from trauma. Charlene's new daughter, Nia, was failing to thrive. Because Dr. Burke was able to make the connection between toxic stress and physical health, she recommended talk therapy as a treatment for Charlene and assumed that it would help Nia's physical health as well. Over the course of trust-building months in therapy, Charlene slowly went from a new mother with a flat affect and very little response to her daughter, to an active and engaged mother making careful plans for feeding and care and comfort for Nia. And Nia's health improved as her mother's depression decreased. Then one week, Charlene didn't show up for her weekly appointment, and she didn't respond to the therapist's follow-up phone calls. She stopped coming to therapy for several weeks, and when she finally did return, she came in with the fading outline of a black eye. It turns out that Nia's father had shown up, gotten angry, and hit Charlene. When both mother and daughter finally came back in for treatment, it was clear they were experiencing a toxic stress response. Charlene was distant and flat again, and Nia was ill and fussy. The therapist worked slowly, carefully, and lovingly with Charlene to uncover her fear that her baby daughter's reaction to the stress indicated that she had a temper like her father. Then, in therapy, they slowly climbed the hill of trust again, with Charlene integrating and understanding both of her own toxic stress response and her daughter's, using that new understanding to assess their behavior and their responses, and then building a stable foundation for Nia to thrive. Charlene built coping mechanisms for her own stress and fear, and thereby reduced Nia's stress, which led Nia to grow and thrive, and by 18 months old, be running through the hallways of the clinic, giggling with her happy mother chasing after her. While trauma and its effects, toxic stress, can spread through a person's system, a person's body, affecting physical health and even the health of the bodies around it. Intervention, careful, loving treatment can prevent that stress from getting worse and from spreading. That young man at the beginning of the sermon, Gabriel, who had just been handed a knife and pointed towards killing another human being while he was in a very suggestible state, took a few steps toward the intended victim and paused. And in that moment of pause, he remembers an image of his father flashing into his mind. And he knew that if he went through with this violence, he would never again be able to look his father in the face without hiding this terrible thing from him. His pause turned into a full stop. Because of his loving relationship with his father, Gabriel turned away from that violence. He turned his life around. He re-enrolled in school, and eventually he started that nonprofit organization, the Mind Body Awareness Project, to work with incarcerated young people. He knew that the only thing that had stopped him from committing a heinous crime was the ability to pause and then a stable, loving relationship. And so he spent his life working to give additional tools to young people, tools to pause and tools to create the possibilities for stable and loving attachments in their own lives. To be whole does not mean to be perfect. It doesn't mean not having holes in the heart or knots in the body or deep toxic pain from the past. The losses of our lives, our injuries, are ingrained in our wood. The tight, hard swirls of passing time or the loose, cracked scar tissue of injury from which the center might fall out. Even toxic stress or trauma does not mean we're broken. It means that we need a little extra love. We need an accepting woodworker who blends the whole into art, or a caring arborist who slowly and carefully treats the disease so that it doesn't spread. But these are problems of loving attention, not irrevocable brokenness. Time, tender acceptance, and love make the difference between whole and not whole, because they understand that even knot holes, loose knots, and loss make the wood what it is. We are human. We are whole, and we are part of the larger whole. There is beauty in our imperfections, in those winding places where we bend and blend into the next thing. We are not broken. We are just growing. May it be so. Will you please rise in body or spirit and join in the responsive reading printed in your orders of service? I'll begin. Walking up the unsteady grass of April.
I move through the shrinking winter, longing for wholeness.
Each part of my body, each shimmer of my heart.
Each crack, not resistance.
Longing for love. I must know I am my own.
And I belong to something larger than me.
I belong to my people, this community, this earth.
I belong to love.
In my longing, I learn belonging, even in the cracks and the knots.
Love returns me to the wholeness of life.
For this, may I be grateful.
For this, may we practice gratitude.
And will you join in singing our closing hymn, number 128? My friends, you are not broken. Each of your imperfections is a unique and beautiful curve in your wood that makes you part of this beautiful whole. May it be so.